Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvrishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Okay, welcome everyone. Cannot believe it's already April in 2026 and the second week at that. But let's continue our journey. Srini Mahodaya, on to you.
Sarvebhya namaskaraha. In the last week, we covered some of the shlokas from Shastra, such as Bhagavad Gita. And we covered what is rhythm from Rig Veda and what is how dharma must be lived from the Taittiriya Upanishad. And then the role-based dharma from the Bhagavad Purana. And Swadharma, which is one's own duty. And Shreyan Swadharmo Vignaha Paradharmat Swanushthitat Swadharme Nidhanam Shreya Paradharmo Bhayavaha. That one, and how the duty arises from nature itself. Brahmana Kshatriya Visham Shudranancha Parantapa Karmani Pravibhaktani Swabhava Prabhavair Gunaihi. So we covered that and how it is so natural to oneself. And also, even if imperfection exists, sahajam karma kaunteya sadoshamapi natyajet sarvarambhahi doshena dhumena agnihi iva avrataha. So one should not abandon one's natural duty, even if flawed. All actions are covered by some defect anyway, like fire by smoke. So, imperfection is not a reason to abandon your role, was the conclusion. All right. And we studied how Swadharma is actually not imposed and it is discovered at the intersection of nature, role, and order, and so on. We also found an example of the dilemma faced by Arjuna and also how you have to identify your own Swadharma. And also a flow chart on how to identify my Swadharma. So first thing is the universal check. Is it Samanya Dharma? And if it is so, what's the specific role or the Vishesha Dharma? What's the responsibility here? Am I a parent, a leader, engineer, whatever? And then the Swabhava check. Is the Swabhava, is my inner nature, does it align? Does it align with what needs to be done? And is it leveraging my natural strengths? Am I forcing an imitation or acting out of my nature? So that was important. At the same time, we learned how Swabhava is made in the sense of Sattva, Rajas, Tamas, and how they can vary from person to person. And all of Swadharma was based on the most ethical, context-aware action suited to our own role. Life, it could be at the life stage, at a certain life stage, and also depends on the nature, chosen from a state of clarity. So that is Swadharma. All right. There is another important darshana here, which actually gives us more insight into what is the role of action, and it is the philosophy of action itself, because interpreting what needs to be done or what we are obligated to do in a complex world is not easy. So Mimamsa gives us a lens to the subject of action. So as we see ourselves, executing the role of Swadharma or Vishesha Dharmas, and also meeting the requirements of the outer world, that is ethics, law, policy, education, public life, and so on and so forth, the interpretation of what must be done in a given context is not easy. So many rishis worked on this subject and how to interpret, rank, and apply duties. So that is the subject we are talking about. All right. So Mimamsa is a subject which is all about life's dilemmas to disciplined interpretation. Though it is the subject of Vedas, it studies language, the shape of action, or what action entails and what action is made up of, and how and what triggers action and how it needs to be performed. For example, we do see ourselves, you know, if we take an example of our own real lives, we keep seeing examples and dilemmas, such as, let's say there is a doctor and he has to keep patients' information private. He has to save a life. At the same time, he can only save life by disclosing the critical details. Is there a problem in seeing? Sorry.
No, no, it's all good.
It's okay. All right. Yeah. So we have to, the doctor has to save a life by sharing critical details. Now he's thinking whether to he has a duty to protect confidentiality and also have a duty to prevent harm. What should I do? All right. So similarly, we do come across these kinds of examples, right, where duties often overlap and they do conflict. And the questions may arise, such as, oh, which duty is mine in the situation? How do I read the rules correctly? Right? And which duty has priority? How do we know what the text, if there is a text, it could be a text on ethics, or it could be an instruction manual, or it could actually be something that you don't know what the situation requires, but you're obligated to read something and come to a conclusion. So this was part of Mimamsa, and Mimamsa subject was Vedas. And Vedas, what did the Vedas do? So they did not see Vedas as some kind of a metaphysical reality that needs to be understood. Yes, that's important, but we do know that there are a lot of descriptive elements in the Vedas as well as prescriptive elements. The Mimamsakas see life itself is action, and everything that we do is what actually matters. And doing is more important than thinking, because dharma is all about conduct. You can understand many things. There are different parts of life, knowing and doing, and we try to know as much as possible. But what actually matters is doing. And how come we shouldn't study doing itself? It's not just about doing in terms of any action, but prescriptive actions. Duty is not just any action like eating, mating, or sleeping, or running, walking, and all these are actions, but they are not actually duties. Duties are normative as well as authoritative in the context of Vedas. So, therefore, they came up with not just a philosophy of action, but also the methods of interpretation. Therefore, they did recognize, so we need more than just instinct, right? So we need a method, and the need of the method gave them the need of a method actually requires interpreting language as well. Not just interpreting the language, but when to use what kind of language. So it was not just an opinion or simply faith based, but also not a blind literalism. They did not follow everything that was written. Right, they had to interpret it, and it was done in a very disciplined way. That is the space, and there is a need to interpret, and that is the space where Mimamsa emerges. So, therefore, Mimamsa is considered the science of understanding obligation. So, it asks, how do we know what ought to be done? And how do we read texts to discover it? So most importantly, who is qualified and what needs to be done? Now, because when you open a text, it says what needs to be done, or simply what should be avoided, or sometimes you just see something is supported, an action is supported, or an action is condemned. That needs to be understood, because Vedas are not like simple studies or novels. It's much more than that. Also, there are many ritualistic actions that are sacred to dharma, and some of these actions could be uh, paid back. It's like paying back the debt. It is in the form of runas. There are three forms of runas, as we studied earlier. It is the Rishi Runa, Deva Runa, and Pitru Runa. So, and to pay back all these debts, these runas, we have certain actions. And some of these actions, we don't know what the results are not immediate. The results are not perceptible. You don't see them. So they are adrushta, no drushta. It is not seen, but it will yield result. And that is called apurva, the unseen result. And this is the term that Mimamsakas use in the context of Vedic interpretations. So they do have a conflict resolution method, and which duty prevails. And that is what we're going to know about, and why it matters today. From ancient texts to modern decisions, we do know that better decisions come from better interpretations, not just the better interpretations of the situation, but also of certain texts that we follow in the society. It could be a simple instruction set, or it could be just a manual, or a business conduct book, or actually even the complex legal matter. So, Hindu law in India is actually influenced by Mimamsa as well. In fact, some of the court decisions have made sure, I guess, Markandeya Kajju was the CJI, Chief Justice of India, and he has certain blogs where he has talked about how he applied Mimamsa principles to certain decision making, legal decision making, and how it was useful. So he could use that argument, and he won the case as well. Now, we just wanted to go over this idea, and wanted to ask you, have you ever faced two duties that seem to pull you in different directions? And were good intentions just enough? Or we need good interpretations? If you're reading a sacred or a legal text, what helps you decide that really means something? Can you think of a situation today where Mimamsa approach could help? Right? Now, you come across what kinds of texts? And first thing that I want to know is, in today's situation, do you encounter that kind of dilemma? where it requires you to study something. Anyone wants to take it up? Mhm. No, yes, no.
Yes, G. Yeah, for me, um, you mentioning better interpretations leading to better results. It's a fairly hard thing to do.
Mhm.
I've experienced like just trying to. So for you to get better interpretation, you need to have more of a knowledge base. So understanding what is the right knowledge is self interpretation is number one, and then the group level interpretation is the second one.
Mhm.
So going from a self understanding to just having a conversation to validate my understanding has been the hardest thing
Mhm.
in a business setting. And
Mhm.
then also knowing the audience or the recipient of that information who I'm sharing with has been a big challenge for me.
So, why do we face dilemma? Is it because two actions or two sets of actions appear similar and you don't know the consequence? Or you can't evaluate which one is better? Is it the lack of quantifying the result of a certain method or a certain action?
The quantification is always there
Mhm.
because it's hard to quantify the current state of the conflict um, among um, among different teams or different sets of folks.
Mhm.
Um, Quantification is the probably the if you have a track record, like if you have a tracking some way
Mhm.
of the situation, then you might have the luxury of quantification. But if you're coming firsthand trying to understand the situation, I think you need to have time on hand to self-interpret. I mean, self-learn first, research, and then try to come to some sort of a hypothesis, and then validate with numbers. So um, if you have some history, that would help. But understanding the history in the right format is also pretty
Mhm.
challenging to me.
Look at this example, the doctor, and if he keeps the patient's information private because of HIPAA or whatever, right? Which is required, and if he discloses those details, it's possible that his insurance would increase so much so that when it may come in news media, it may be known to everybody, and later it's possible that he may not get the kind of insurance that he needs. Not only that, maybe they're of a certain marriage age, and this is gone public, and that can actually affect, right? And people, when society knows every health detail, that is to be confidential. So in that case, this person is making the decision. The doctor thinks that oh, we can share a critical detail. It's okay because it's required to save this person. And probably the doctors face this a lot in that situation. And would that be right if they do that? Is it okay to save a person physically but actually harm him mentally? How do you decide?
Viniji,
Hmm?
my question here is how do we know if we are the appropriate person to decide that in the first place?
Correct. Perfect. So you're talking about adhikara. Good. Good.
Yeah,
And
I mean, in this specific example that you mentioned, is it my decision to decide whether I should disclose the HIPAA personal details or not, right? Or am I just doing my duty?
yes, only person that can do that is authorized to do is the adhikari. If doctor is an adhikari, if he's qualified for that, then he probably can. Or maybe not duty doctor, but not a surgeon, but probably someone higher up, right?
Yes.
And so there is a certain protocol that complexity is always there. They say, oh, duty doctor might come and say, oh, no, I can't sign on this one, but I'll have to ask my supervisor. So this is constantly going on. Let's say there's no one else. Can he do that? There's because the time is always limited, and he probably cannot get hold of another person. And if he does that, he might be hurting his own career, right? So there are many situations like that. So what do you think is the step-by-step process? I know you can't have an answer, but what's the framework that you can think of?
I would think first understanding the full context
Mm.
and reevaluating everything, because this is something that you can't write down,
Mm.
right? Second is, are you deciding for yourself
Let's
to make
classify. What's the first thing that you're doing? Role. Is
Role.
the role. You mean the professional role?
in this context, the doctor and all that, maybe it is the professional role or
Okay.
the role of a
Well,
judge.
Vishesha Dharmas, yes, professional role.
Yes. Then identify, am I doing it? Is there any personal unconscious bias?
Mhm.
Like I could be a judge who's sentencing drug addicts to like a death sentence, but when my own son becomes, I join the human rights activists,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
Then that is, will I do that? We have to evaluate that. Will it apply even if it is for my own sake, or am I only doing it as posturing or
Yeah.
virtue signaling?
Yeah.
That is one. And third one is, am I perverting a truth? Like, for example, food is important to stay alive, but that cannot be used as an excuse to just enjoy food. That kind of a thinking, uh, like I'm doing, say, the example of a parent. I love my children, but am I willing to let them go at a young age and stay in a Gurukula, right? So if not, am I doing that decision for me because I want to enjoy time with my children, or am I prioritizing their future, their ability to grow and
So are you
blossom?
in that kind of a dilemma today in this situation where you had to
Yeah.
send? Okay, I see.
Yeah, I always am. So that is why I do like 50-50 kind of a thing.
And
Because
it's very personal. It's very personal. You just cannot imitate or copy someone else's decision-making process and then apply it to yourself. Correct?
that is correct. That is correct. And in modern context, like the AI, driverless cars, anything to do with automation will have this kind of similar dilemmas,
Dilemma. Yeah, very
where these things need to be identified.
correct. Yeah. And has anyone attempted here in the kind of AI ethics, or if they are using that as a decision-making tool? Do you know of any?
I have seen that in driverless cars. I think someone in this group only, Mukundji, shared like a paper. So
Okay.
how will the automation decide, like if the car is self-driving,
Mhm.
when will it decide to save the passenger versus when it will decide to save the pedestrian, right? If the car is like at 5 miles an hour
Mhm.
in a city street, then to avoid hitting a pedestrian, even if it hits like a tree or a post, there will be damage to the car, which belongs to the owner, the person in the passenger seat, but there will be no damage. In that case, maybe, the pedestrian should be prioritized. Something of that nature, right? But what is the actual speed limit you will set? Like when
Yes.
exactly to save the passenger and sacrifice the pedestrian versus sacrificing cosmetic
So what
injuries to
if
the
the
car.
self-driving car happens to be an emergency vehicle.
Yes, again, adding more context. Yes, that makes it even more complicated.
Hmm. Okay. Anyone else wants to add or join the discussion of nuances of decision making, or faced a certain dilemma and looking for an answer through dharma, through swadharma and mimamsa.
Well,
Mimamsa,
the
yeah.
gut feeling in I mean, even in the corporate world, and in personal situations, many times people default to gut feeling, which is, hey, what's
Mm.
the least harm, or what's the worst that could happen, and then work from there backwards, right? I say, hey, if to make some decision, and if things go bad, you're not having all the information to make the decision. If
Mhm.
things go bad, hey, this is the worst that could happen, and understand that, and then try to improve from where that is towards a slightly better outcome, if at all possible, right? So that's the way to go about. At least gut feeling is my thing is, okay, hey, prepare for the worst and try to improve upon from there. And in this case, if you have faced with a dilemma, neither appears, maybe two options, five options, 10 options, none of them appear straightforward as good. I think you have to choose what is the least bad or the least worse situations, and then try to look at from that point of view,
What's the
right?
lesser evil? You have to rank them up, right?
Yeah, you have to rank them.
Yeah. DCG?
Yes, G. I like the fact of the role in the situation important, and then also the latitude. If somebody's looking at the point of latitude, like which level you're in,
Mhm.
again, it's self thinking is one, but the who you're talking to, the audience always matters all the time.
Mhm.
And then if it's a public situation, which I'm right now going through, is the people, cities laying down roads, resurfacing, and I'm fighting that in my community. I'm trying to push the fact that they are not doing a good job, and then they're for the public good. Um, I'm recording and documenting everything. So at that point, I'm feeling like, okay, why am I the only one trying to push this? You know, this, you know. So those are conflicts that I'm facing. Like, okay, why are we doing like a whole group of people, but just me trying to push one way? So those conflicts are arising in me. Like, okay, how long can I push this for? Like, and that is something that I'm trying to figure out. Like, happening in the past few weeks, I'm trying to go through the same dilemma. Like, how far should I push the agenda, or is it seemingly my agenda versus a public agenda?
Oh,
Right.
okay. So it
So
is. Mhm. And so you do go through. So whether you are qualified, which role are you playing? And then what should be done and what should not be done, or what should be avoided. So that is what we call vidhi and nishedha in Mimamsa. And do you have to refer to any text? Anyone else? Like when you're making a decision, do you consult maybe Google, or maybe read articles, or let's say some more formal documents, your
No,
bylaws and things like that?
normally, like in real life situations, uh, people would consult like a lawyer. Like, if I do this, will I get into any major trouble?
Oh, that is
Because
illegal.
it is that
Yeah,
is one. Yeah,
but you fire every time, right? You cannot.
yeah. You cannot.
Yes. Yeah.
But there are some things like at the spur of the moment, like say emergency situation, like bomb blast, and you have to save as many people as you can,
Mhm.
and you have to decide which people I can save by just stopping the bleeding, and which people, if I go to save, there may be a 50-50 chance, but the amount of time I spend on them, I could have easily saved hundreds of others, right? So those kind of things, I don't know where to classify them, but I personally haven't searched uh, anything like what you are saying, like any ethics docs or anything of that nature.
Yeah. So, yes. Anyone else? Okay.
So, for me, uh, I would think that in the case of decision making, like pedestrian versus emergency,
Mhm.
one has to look at what is recoverable and what is non-recoverable. So,
Mm.
pedestrian is always non-recoverable loss
Yes.
versus if you hit emergency, that is down the line problem.
Mhm.
So, one could make a decision based on uh, if the results of the decisions can be recovered in future or not.
Yeah. So, your risk tolerance, recoverable versus irrecoverable risk, right? So that needs to be considered. Right. And when you're actually listening to someone or reading something, how will you know something is an action, something is a duty, and something is actually talking about inspiring of an act, inspiration for an action, or emphasizing an action? How will you know that thing? How do you parse it? What's your method? Is it happening by osmosis because people do it and you do it, or you're actually deliberately thinking about it? Mimamsa is very deliberate about it. And we'll see why. And when it comes to conflict resolution, they are ranked duties all the time. And that is why it helps to understand language and how the use of words, the language actually plays a role in the process of thought and helps you resolve conflicts. And let's see. And these are the kind of questions, right? Which duty is mine? Which duty is others? How do we know what the text intends, and which should come first? And these are common questions. Right? For these questions, Mimamsa answers. Okay, let's look at that one. So the key point here is, so Mimamsa is not about finding an answer, but it begins with questions. And gives us a very powerful method to understand what is duty and what is the method of resolving a conflict, and to act with wisdom, that is viveka. Not, we talked about buddhi being the controller, and buddhi not being just clever or skilled, but also having the discernment called viveka. And that is where actually Mimamsa can help. So there are many thinkers in this discipline, and here is the genealogy. We know that the Jaimini Sutras were the first of its kind for Mimamsa, and the Jaimini happens to be one of the Mahabharata Vyakhyanakaras as well, and also considered a student of Vyasa. And after Jaimini, we see Shavara as the Bhashakara. And there are two schools, Bhatta Mimamsakas and Prabhakara. So Bhatta and Prabhakara are two different schools of Mimamsa. And they are the ones, the Bhatta are the ones who actually systematized and defended Mimamsa with great rigor. So Kumarila Bhatta, Parthasarathi Mishra, Apadeva, and Laugakshi Bhaskara. So these are the names that stand out because they wrote many compendiums and bhashyas or vartikas and things like that, but we don't have many of which, but that are going to be very useful, at least to study more about this. But what we have is currently what I do know about and what I got is of Logakshi Bhaskara's Artha Sangraha. And here is, if you go to archive.org and type Logakshi Bhaskara's Artha Sangraha, you get the text. And here it is. And this is what I've been using. And pretty famous, actually, of Chaukamba. It's a Sanskrit text, but it talks a lot about how to interpret the language of the Vedas. It can be very useful. Nowadays, you have nice translations, okay, or reliable translations. Not always preferred, but it may help in certain contexts. And of course, I think another English translation is also available. Okay. And let's go back to okay. Why is it overlapping? And when it comes to Prabhakara's stream, they were the ones who emphasized immediate cognition of duty and linguistic subtleties. So Prabhakara Mishra, Shalikanatha Mishra, and Devatananda. So these are the names that we know about and who have written important commentaries. And how Mimamsa influences, yes, you can see its influence in Vedanta, other darshanas such as Vedanta, and of course, Dharmashastras, and even the jurisprudence. And in the English language, this system of study is called hermeneutics. Vedanta adopted Mimamsa's methods of hermeneutics or interpretation. The sentence analysis, the theory of Shabda, or the verbal authority, and also the rules of resolving the conflicts that they encounter in the texts. Shankara, Ramanuja, Madhva, and many other Vedantins engaged Mimamsa extensively. And you do hear of Adi Shankara defeating Mandana Mishra, who was the nephew of Kumarila Bhatta, who was a Mimamsaka. And the Mimamsakas were pretty strong in the early part of the millennia. And that is what we hear. So Adi Shankara had to debate. He wanted to debate Kumarila Bhatta. And if you've seen that movie, Adi Shankara in Sanskritam, and there he actually he tries to debate Kumarila Bhatta, who is actually entering the fire because he thinks that he was deceptive towards his Buddhist guru. So he recommends Adi Shankara to go and debate his disciple and also his nephew, Mandana Mishra. So that is how the story began. The debate that went on between Mandana Mishra and Adi Shankara, which was presided by another, his own Mandana Mishra's wife, Udaya Bharati, who was also a Vedic scholar and a fantastic Mimamsa scholar. And we do see that Hindu jurisprudence or the Hindu law is actually influenced by Mimamsa. And we have seen in the past, Nyaya and the Mimamsa, they really engaged with each other to debate over language, meaning, negation, the epistemology, and also the sources of knowledge, and also the pramanas, and so on and so forth. So the dialogue between the Nayayikas, the Nyaya proponents, and the Mimamsakas actually refined both systems. And even to this day, we see that it influenced the theory of rituals, the poetic hermeneutics, or the alankaras, and later Sanskrit scholarship through its rigorous methods of textual interpretation. So, therefore, Mimamsa is not an isolated subject or an isolated school. It is the fountainhead of hermeneutics or interpretative tradition whose thinkers shaped Vedanta, Dharmashastra, Nyaya, and much of Indian intellectual history. And let's go to another. Now, coming back to what is Dharma according to Mimamsakas. So we said that it's interpreting duty in a complex world, right? But they also have given the definition of Dharma. Chodana lakshanartho dharma. Dharma is that purpose characterized by injunction. So it has to trigger action because dharma is satya in conduct, right? So something has to trigger you for that action, and that characteristic, if you find in the sentences of Vedas, that is action oriented, and that should be studied. So that is how the Sutra of Jaimini begins. So we came to know about Swadharma. Or, for example, what is my role and what's my duty, which is part of Vishesha Dharmas, and there are specific duties, and we have to take part in it. And of course, whenever there is moral complexity of this way or that way, and weighing between the Vishesha Dharmas, which look very, very equivalent, and how do we, in the same context, they can be conflicting, and in a slightly different context, the same action that you executed may look wrong, right? So Mimamsa is interpreting, and that is a gap it tries to fill in, and provides a lot of analysis for a discerned action or the right action. So any decision making, we need Swadharma. It is about whether the duty is which duty is situated that aligns with my natural inclinations, which is Swadharma. And what if the case is special? So our duty is context sensitive. How do we decide when duty is conflict? So it definitely requires interpretation of duty. So Mimamsa conclusively has been the Indian discipline of interpreting duty when life is morally complex. Of course, it can be extended to legal complexities as well. Now, you touched upon the subject of adhikara. Who is bound by duty? Right? It belongs to a qualified person in a particular context. So we have to ask questions such as, who is eligible for a duty? What's the role? Does that person have competence? And is that the right person for the situation? And who is addressed by that injunction? What are the qualifications, eligibility, and conditions are studied under that? Who is addressed by an injunction, part of the adhikari, and under what duty does it apply? What's the context of the adhikari? What are the restrictions and exceptions? So duty is not universal. It depends on the role and eligibility. A judge, a doctor, or a parent, even though they are the same person, may be in different roles, he cannot be executing the same duties that is assigned to a specific role in different time and place. So the place, time, and the role, they decide what that person should do or should not do. So that is what is called adhikara. And Broadly, the sentences of the Vedas were divided into Vidhi and Nishedha, broadly. So that is, what should be done is Vidhi, what should be avoided is Nishedha. You shall good, you shall study Vedas, or you shall give alms, dana. So that is considered Vidhi Vakyas. And Nishedha Vakyas are what is prohibited, whatever causes harm. Eat, no, do not eat what is impure, or do not speak falsely. So these are Nishedha Vakyas. It tells us what to avoid. Together, they are the grammar of obligation in Mimamsa. Together. And we also have a very special classification called Arthavada. And here they study how the texts actually persuade us to do our duty. For example, the statements of praise, significance, and the rewards of certain actions. That is to reinforce the commands by appealing to your mind and heart. Heart first, and then mind later, to inspire a deeper commitment. Right? For example, you can use the classification of Arthavada or the definitions of Arthavada to understand any text or passages of text that will tell you, oh, if there is an explicit action, it tells you what to do positively, so that's a Vidivakya, you know. And Nisheda, what negates it, we do know. But Arthavakyas will help you to understand why this action is considered important. They could be encouraging, so they could actually be warning sometimes, but in a way that actually demotivates you, right? Arthavada makes dharma feel meaningful and compelling. So it may add praise or blame. It can reinforce the same commands. It may justify a duty or just tell stories. So that is considered Arthavada. Now the question. So how do you know, what are the kinds of examples that we see as the sutra? For example, Swadhyayo Adhyetavyaha, this Veda is to be studied. So Adhyetavyaha, there is it's a grammar in, it's a grammatical element in Sanskrit language. You should do, this should be done, Adhyetavyaha. It's something called the suffix is tavyat, they say, which gets added, and whenever that happens, you see even the sutra has swadhyayo adhyetavyaha as an example. Veda is to be studied, or you should perform this duty, or somewhat equivalent, depending on, oh, you should study the Vedas, and in a classroom you should perform, or you should do this. It's equivalent to saying you should do this assignment. And Nishedha Vakya is, an example is, Ma hinsyat sarva bhutani, one should not injure living beings. That would translate to do not cause harm. Similarly, Arthavada will be like Swarga kamo yajeta. It's a vidhi like meaning Swarga kamo yajeta. One who does this yaga or the yajna will go to Swarga. That is what it says. Swarga kamo yajeta. One who is desirous of heaven, he should do this yaga. And now here the statement is actually praising the greatness of a certain ritual, and that is Arthavada. So they classify this as, oh, it is not a command, but it actually motivates me to do that thing. So here, this act leads to merit is a very that is the explanation we get. Or neglect leads to loss. This right is praised as exalted. This is these are the kind of examples that we see in the world, but we many times, just because somebody praises an action or there is an element of demotivation, we think that the action should not be done, not considering that it is an arthavada and contextually it may be telling the opposite of what should be done. So if you can classify the sentences, which are nothing but the expressions of thoughts, you can come to the right decision. So Vidhi tells us what to do. Nishedha tells us what to avoid. Arthavada tells us why the text wants us to take the duty seriously. So we have another concept called apurva, and this is the most interesting one. There are many rituals, and many rituals we have heard from our own elders and parents that you should do this thing, that you must do this thing. Don't ask why. You got to do, you have to do this thing. Because many times it's you cannot keep explaining, or the person, the recipient, does not have the whole context to understand why something should be done. They have come up with a different classification in Mimamsa. It is called apurva. Apurva. Purva means before, not seen before, the unseen power of action. How action produces unseen results according to Mimamsa. Let's look at it. So there is a link between right action and future reward. Right? There is an invisible effect that operates beyond immediate sight, which we call adrishta. We don't know. We do certain actions. We say gratitude is good. We don't see the result of that particular action of gratitude. But we ought to do that anyway, because it is focusing on the process. Perform this Agnihotra to attain heaven. This is one such example, right? So they perform the sacrifice, and the person attains the unseen result, is what is said in the Vedas. The Mimamsa considers this as a apurva, a sentence that is apurva, which generates unseen potency or attain an unseen result. So it is the unseen power of action. It ensures what is done today may bear the fruit tomorrow, even if it is not immediately visible. So there may be karmic, causal, or transformative actions, but it is unseen. So that is classified as apurva. Any question at this point?
One day I have a question on apurva.
Yeah.
So the unseen action, is that like a permanent thing, or is that evolving? Like if you are a child, like how studying something is kind of apurva. You may think, why am I studying maths and chemistry? But when you grow up, you kind of understand something
Yes.
that is permanently apurva
Because
in
we
the
don't have
lifetime.
all the. One analogy that I can give is, and I had some trouble of how to explain this thing because we stress so much on the pramanas, right? Pratyaksha, Anumana, and then Shabda and all that, right? Now, is this apurva? Are they saying, do they mean that it should be, it is unseen and somehow it should be brought to my pratyaksha, like a scientific experiment? No, that is not what they're saying. What they're saying is it is a Shabda Pramana. Okay, it is going to remain apurva. And qualified people may attain it. But how do I know that a certain ritual or a certain action, without seeing any result whatsoever, why should I do that thing? That's a common question that we get. Right? So for that, the best analogy could be that you get a letter. Okay, if you get a letter, you mow your lawn, a random letter. Will you mow your lawn? Says that you'll get a citation. You don't, right? If you do have some kind of a seal of the HOA or a legal authority saying that your neighbor actually complained, it went to the court. So you see the seal that it's coming from the court saying that you are obligated to mow your lawn within so many days, otherwise you pay the penalty. You're going to do this thing, right? Have you seen the legal authority who sent you that letter? In both cases, it was just a letter, but one seal, one signature changed everything. That is also a drishta. You're not seen, you don't know the source, but you know the consequence, what happens simply by looking at the signature or the seal of a legal authority. So Mimamsa does give clues as to what can be apurva by doing this kind of analysis or the hermeneutics. The clues are telling you that there is a consequence, and the consequence is positive, but it's unseen. And here are the clues. Does that help? Because in no other way we can just justify what is Shabda Pramana. It's simply by looking at, comparing with an analogy that we have. And how do we know? Putra Kameshti Yaga, if you do, you get a child. Dasharatha did. And he was doing many yagas before. He was not getting it. So it's not that you do a yaga and you get the result. It's not like that. So there is a certain unseen relationship, unlike a vyapti in Nyaya. In Nyaya, there has to be that invariable concomitant relationship, cause and effect. Yatra yatra agni, yatra yatra dhumaha, tatra tatra vannihi. If there is a smoke, there is fire, right? So that is an established relationship, cause and effect. The Nyaya uses that. When we say apurva, it is not that. It's not the vyapti. It's not that invariable relationship between cause and effect. They are talking about something else. They are talking about a subject in the realm of Shabda Pramana, not Anumana. And the analogy that I gave is, here is the clue. You don't know, you haven't seen the legal authority, you don't know the consequence, but you have studied about what the consequence is. But simply by looking at the signature of a judge, or the seal of a judge, or the letterhead, you know that you are going to mow the lawn. And you will do it.
Yeah,
Okay.
I have a question. Would this be the same as the 3 runos that you mentioned?
Runas are not actions, they are triggers for actions. Runas is what you owe.
That also something you don't see the
motivators for actions, but Mimamsa is focusing on action itself.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this thing, right? This apurva concept of apurva, isn't it highly subjective to exploitation? All the reason I'm bringing this up is because we are saying that we are following actions based on pramanas, whether it is adhikara pramana or shabda pramana.
Yeah.
We are saying that this person has authority or this text has authority. That's why we are following it. This thing. But if you think about today's day and age, there are a lot of people who claim to have authority. Now,
Yes.
with your example of the judge, we may not have seen the judge, but we can go and see who this person is, see if that person is actually a judge. Somebody might seal something, but that might not be a judge. But we can verify that path. But for us to verify if that person has adhikara to speak on this subject, it's so hard nowadays because there is so much dilution of the language, right?
Perfectly asked question, and I think it's a very wise question, especially in this context. I thought about this thing because I knew that this question is going to come at any point, because I myself had this thing. In the question of legal authority, that from the same analogy that we took, you do know that if you go to that particular address, you will meet the person and you know who the legal authority is. Therefore, you had to act. What is actually happening is, sometimes you don't know, but you ask another person, what happens if you don't do this thing? And the neighbor will tell you, or maybe your parents will tell you. Why? So that you actually went for the aptavakya. There, right? You got it. But if you acted upon it, you would have found it. So that also you know. Actually, you never do that. You simply do things just by following the letter or the symbol in the letter. Even though you may not have, you would have probably mowed the same lawn, like what? I mean, you would have gotten like 20 letters, maybe something like that. And you would have acted, but never went and verified whether that authority existed or not. That is called trust in the order of things, trust in that social order. That is the kind of trust which Mimamsa is talking about. Okay, let's look at it more. And it is not blind faith, because they are following the pramanas. And scriptural authority is purely text-centered. It is not God-centered for the Mimamsakas. In Abrahamic faiths like Judaism, Christianity, or Islam, it is God-centered. It is revealed scriptures. Here, it's simply authorless, apaurushaya. And you see, it is similar. The conclusions, if you simply compare the conclusions, it might appear like, oh, it's also blind faith. And you're right, anyone can misuse it. All those things do exist. Therefore, that is the reason why Vedantins won the debate, I guess, or who based on the experience of things, not just the interpretative or the intellectual understanding of what action is. But look at it this way: some differences, and see if it gives us an insight. Mimamsa says the Veda is authorless, right? And Abrahamic revelation says the scripture as God's word. The scripture is the God's word, and we simply have to follow the meaning. That is what I mean. And Mimamsa says, oh, it's reliable, and these are eternal texts. It is not authored by human or divine. This is the source of truth. This is the Shabda Pramana. But here, in the Abrahamic traditions, the divine will be whatever that is divine, the God's scriptures will be revealed through the prophets. Right? So they're all recorded in the texts. You look at that thing, that reasoning is not there in Mimamsakas. They don't need God to explain the Vedas. They have pramanas. Okay. And scriptural injunctions known through the power of Shabda itself. So they worked on the power of Shabda and the meaning of sound and all that. Right? And here it is, in the Abrahamic traditions, the revelation is disclosed by the authority and sovereignty of God. Right? So how they interpret text is very different. And Vedic Shabda is the independent pramana for dharma. Independent pramana. Okay. Whereas scripture is entrusted and confirmed by God's authority. Here humans can interpret in the Mimamsa. So that's key. Humans can use the techniques that are outlined by the Mimamsakas, Vidhivakya, Nishedavakya, Arthavada, and then other textual interpretations and the techniques that they have come up with. Okay, humans can use it. You're not there to interpret, right? The hermeneutics is very different, and how it is based is different. It is centered on the authority of Vedas. Okay, whereas God's will bridges act and result. So he is standing between. He is the primal reason of why certain action. Only the surrender to the God will yield that result. No matter what, your good deeds won't. Okay, if you must accept the Savior, the God as the Savior. That is the only God. Only through me. Jesus says that you have to come only through me, not others. Right? And the act of yajna, or the sacrifice, generates unseen link for apurva. Here, in the Abrahamic traditions, act of sacrifice receives divine reward or punishment. Now, what's the difference? The difference is that you do need God and the authority and faith simply because it's a scripture. And here, everything requires Shabda, Anumana, and also within even though the entire Veda is considered a Shabda Pramana, there are analysis of the sentences that are constantly happening for a Mimamsaka. Okay, here. For example, when it comes to conflict resolution matrix, right? If the situation is general and specific rules are clashing, that we have talked about it many times, specific wins. So that is key here. Many times we were saying, oh, whether the general should win or the specific should win. See, in the context of the Vedas, while interpreting the text of the Vedas, specific wins. For example, be truthful generally, but a more specific professional or a protective duty may shape what must be disclosed, as we saw in the example of a doctor. Right? And command, and these are major four classes. There are many granular details. But another class is command and prohibition, vidhi and nisheda, if there is a clash. Prohibition is the one that restricts the command in that case. If something says do not do this, that takes precedence over what should be done. So a general ritual command is actually blocked by a special restriction in one setting. So there are examples, and it is generally applicable to. You normally, whenever you go to the water, you go swim. But when you see a Nisheda Vakya, do not swim here because of sharks. They may or may not explain the reason. But when they say do not swim here, meaning that area you should not, but you go elsewhere and do that thing. So even though it's a tourist spot and you see thousands of people swimming, but one Nisheda Vakya is enough to override the command or the general understanding, or even the command of your swimming instructor, who would say, "Go and swim." Right? That may be a command. That's what the coach does. But if there is a prohibition, it overrides. So similarly, in the Vedas, when it comes to yagas, yajnas, and all of that thing, the main act and the supporting act, if they clash, main act wins. The essential duty takes priority over ceremony. Okay. A simple example. can you be a Christian if you don't undergo baptism? And
Depends on who you ask.
who you ask, correct. Yeah, I mean, scriptural authorities, right? And here, the essential duty takes priority over ceremony sometimes. Okay. Same act and different roles. So qualified role decides. A doctor may have a duty that a bystander does not. So this is also recognized. These are the 4 general classes of conflict resolution that you see. More
Only in the main act and supporting act, is it kind of like doctor versus nurse? If the nurse may have a disagreement how to do a procedure, but the doctor's decision will override that. Is it
lower
in
right.
that
She
context?
might, yes, correct.
Okay.
Because that role is the dharma. It's closely tied to the role. For example, general duty, keep confidentiality. The specific duty, prevent immediate grave harm. So the resolution is specific emergency duty can override the general duty. See, they have come up with this kind of algorithm. Now, judge and compassion. General value is compassion. The role specific duty of a judge is the impartial application of law. So the resolution is role qualified obligation governs the judge's action. And now the third class of conflict resolution, or you can say category, the ritual command and the ritual restriction. So general injunction is perform this rite, perform this yajna in a certain manner. The specific prohibition is do not use a certain material in a particular rite. For example, you do see that in the Shraddha karmas at home, they don't use tomatoes, they do not use the carrots and those kind of things. There is a specific prohibition. Right? So they don't use those kind of things. Or even in what is used in a wedding is not used in the Shraddha karma. In fact, the wedding ceremonies and the wedding feast have introduced so many things that are prohibited in the other karmas. Resolution is the specific prohibition narrows the general injunction. Only if you need, probably, very specifically, maybe. Truth and non-harm. General moral pull is, okay, tell the truth. Right? You should tell the truth all the time. Context-sensitive duty. What if you're a spy? Avoid causing unjust harm. So that is you don't, at the end of the day, it's all, linking back to how the larger order, the cosmic order, right? The social order, or if it is larger order to sustain life, so that is protected. Resolution is Mimamsa would ask whether the situation changes the scope of the general rule rather than treating the conflict as flat. Meaning they always have a priority, and they assign priorities, assign ranking, and context sensitive duty overrides general duty or general rules. And now there should be more and more clarity for why the characters in the epics did as they did, right? So what tools does Mimamsa use to resolve the conflict? You see that. What's the time now? Oh, it's 20. So there are 5 interpretive tools such as Linga, Vakya, Prakarana, Sthana, and Samakhya. Here, that is how the texts are understood, and they won't guess it when they're reading the Vedas. There's no guess. It reads with a method. Is there a clue in the text that points to an intended meaning, not literal, intended meaning. So linga is the indicative mark or a sign. Linga means lingyate iti, to identify something. Is there a strong sign pointing to one meaning? For example, a passenger repeatedly uses words like offer. A passage repeatedly uses words like offer, yaga, dana, and pour into the fire. So that indication, it signifies this section of the Veda is about a ritual action, not a Narthavada or praise. So they look for certain words, just like modern parsing algorithms look for certain keywords, right? So that is called linga. And vakya, the words are coming together to mean a sentence. So it has to have that meaning, that the meaning should emerge when the words are read together as one connected sentence. So it's not about just parsing one word or taking something out of context and then interpreting it. No, it needs to have that one unity. That it has all the sentences should come together as though many branches of a tree came together to make a whole tree. So that's the whole meaning. For example, he should offer with curds. This sentence shows curds belong to the offering. The words are united in one instruction. You should offer with curds. It's not like, I know he should offer and then you leave the curds. Oh, he should offer. He can offer something. If it says you should do this kind of a ritual or this kind of a puja with this kind of flower, you can't skip it. Cut the sentence there and interpret for your own convenience. So they Mimamsakas do not like convenience. Action is action. It should be performed. And they are the ones who would condemn the idea of Manasa Puja, where people say, oh, why I do the puja, I don't have to do anything and it's there in my mind. So therefore I can offer it. No, it does not work with the Mimamsakas, who are philosophers of action. So prakarana, in the context of the topical setting, the surrounding topic of the discussion, it frames the uncertain statement to give it meaning. So they keep asking what is the surrounding discussion about, because this sentence or this mantra is not clear. This particular ritual is not clear at all. Why this has to be done? What is its meaning? It's not clear. So they go for the whole prakarana, the whole context, and so that the background information, again, the role, the adhikari, and what kind of passage, in which kind of adhyaya. So all that is taken. If the section is about the yajna or the sacrifice, an unclear instruction is understood as belonging to that rite, not all rites. So if a ritual is unclear, the context is seen, and that ritual is specific to that yaga or that yajna. Okay. And that is not applicable all across. Sthana. Sthana is the position of the placement, the location of the statement within the text or the sequence. So where is the statement placed is what they're going to look for. For example, prepare the altar, light the fire, offer ghee, dhritam, and then recite the mantra. So this is the sequence. Now, it is placed right after light the fire, right? Offer the ghee. That is understood as the next step in that ritual sequence. So they did not number it like 1, 2, 3, 4, like the modern documents. They wouldn't. It's all happening as a mantra, right? And what's this? Where is the statement placed? And that statement or the location of the statement decided with the sequence as well. And Samakhya, the title or the name that suggests the nature and focus. In the So then the idea of, oh, what is this yajna about? What's the title of the yajna? The Agnihotra is the title. The daily fire offering that we are supposed to do as Brahma Yajna, whatever, right? After the Sandhya. The name Agnihotra suggests that this specific rite is related to fire offering, helping us understand the section's purpose. So the purpose of this is actually it's very much like modern parsing, where you understand the context and the intended meaning and the intent, right? And also the entire context. If you see how modern AI is working, it's depending on the session context, not unlimited memory, but just the session context. And similarly, these are being interpreted. So how does this help us learn or help us answer any, right? Well, we would know the intended meaning, which is the ingita artha. That will, you know the meaning not simply by knowing what is the meaning in according to a dictionary or the meanings of words, and then you combine all the meanings and you come up with your own interpretation. No, you have to grasp the author's intended meaning. That is when you understood something. Now, which statement governs the case? That will help pick the most authoritative teaching. If you know Linga Vakya Prakarana Sthana Samakhya, Vidhi Nisheda, and Arthavada, then you can interpret and pick the most authoritative teaching. And in any situation, we'll have general and specific. Right? You have rules, you have exceptions. This is constantly seen, even in the Vyakarana, where a general rule is stated and then the specifics are stated or the exceptions are stated. This clarity gives the scope, right? It clarifies the scope of the rule itself. Then what does the surrounding context suggest? So that is our prakarana. That they use the topic to guide the meaning constantly. Is that meaning aligning with the intended meaning? And you have to discover the intended meaning. So which rule has stronger interpretive force? That is to weigh and rank the rules in a given context, in a given role, so that you come to the right decision. So Linga, Vakya, Prakarana, Sthana, and Samakhya, they're all Mimamsakas, discipline tools to understand the Vedic text clearly. So because they do involve ambiguity, and they have to determine which teaching should guide which action. So this they have developed to such an extent that even to this day, they are used for legal interpretations. And there are many details, but I just went over the frameworks, but there are examples that we can actually discuss further. But if you have any questions, please do. Okay.
Very engaging. So should we conclude, Mahoday?
If you can actually stop the recording and then let people ask whatever they want to ask. In that case, they can go.
Okay. So let us very engaging philosophy of deep diving into the Mimamsa philosophy, and let us conclude with the Shanti mantra. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina, Sarve Santu Niramaya, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschit Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Dhanyavad everybody.
Dhanyavad. Mahodaya,
Yeah, go ahead.